Hi, today I'm going to show you an overview over GrapheneOS. I'm going to show you the easiest, fastest and safest way to install it on your device without bricking it. And at the end of this tutorial, you'll be able to use any apps you want to use. So you can have banking apps, you will have notifications, and if you want to, you can even have all Google services without any limitations, including maps, term-by-term navigation, and all the other nice things. Now we're going to do this on a Pixel7, which is here, but I've tried to install it successfully. It was very simple, it's the same process on a Pixel4 right before recording this video. So this installation guide is a guide for generally all Pixel phones, and I don't see very many changes coming up in the future, at least not in the near or medium future. So have a look at the description below. If there are any major changes, then I will make a note of them or link to a new video there. And if you don't have a Pixel device, I will also give you a few alternatives ranked by security and privacy. But let's get to that a little bit later. Let's quickly get some misconceptions out of the way, because when you read about GrapheneOS, there'll always be this one guy pointing out, oh, battery life is bad, it runs sluggish, and that is simply not true. That completely boils down to how you install it and how you configure it. And I'll show you how to do it properly a bit later on. The point here is that on every single device I've tested, from 4 to 7 Pixel and on other devices, this is the most performant, fast, reactive, and battery-saving OS that you can install on an Android phone or on a Pixel phone. Because, and there's a reason for that, the Google services and other services that Google forces upon you and that will always run on a Pixel in the background, they do not run usually all the time with full privileges on a GrapheneOS phone. So you have fewer services running in the background, and that will lead in every single case to either the same battery performance or better, and usually it will run more smoothly on older phones, and of course then on newer phones it will be perfect. So that out of the way, and the other things, notifications run just fine. I'll show you how to do it, and banking apps also work. That's a misconception of people that maybe haven't tried it properly, simply because on custom ROMs with root very often, these kind of apps don't work. But in the case of GrapheneOS, there is no modified, unlocked bootloader or anything else. There's all the checks that a banking app would run through. Don't raise any alarms, because it is a running locked Android system, and so banking apps have absolutely nothing to complain about. Except if you take away permissions that they're not used to being taken away, then of course the app might complain. But then you just give them that permission that you want to. So, in general, I must say, I've been in this now since Android 1.6. I've installed all kinds of ROMs on a multitude of devices, and I always come back to GrapheneOS because it just runs so smoothly, so safely, and I've never ever bricked a device while installing GrapheneOS, and I've bricked quite a few and had to then unbrick them if I could with other ROMs. So this is something, if you're a beginner, this is great. If you are more intermediate or advanced, GrapheneOS is still exactly the right thing for you. And there's one last thing I want to cover here, and that is root or no root. Now, you don't have root on GrapheneOS, and this is good, because root absolutely breaks the whole security concept of Android, and it doesn't give you that many advantages. You used to want root on custom ROMs, because then you could install something like the exposed framework, and then you could limit apps that way and take away their permissions. But that was sort of drilling a huge hole into the whole core of Android, breaking it up, setting up a new sort of prison system inside, and then locking up the different apps in there. But Android can do this if it's properly done with GrapheneOS without requiring any root, and that then also saves you a lot of trouble and lots of other problems that you'd have with other apps. And there's a very big difference between GrapheneOS and all kinds of custom ROMs like LineageOS or Divest and others, and that is you have a locked bootloader. So the whole system is locked up again, and you don't have all kinds of things still open and running, so they can be changed or modified later on by others that might get your phone. One last thing before we get into the installation, and that is you should really install GrapheneOS for the right reasons. The 4 main reasons for GrapheneOS are, for one, you want to protect your privacy and your data from third-party apps, maybe because they become subject to a digital supply chain attack and have malicious code inside of them, or because they are just malicious. So there's quite a few third-party apps that have been spying on people selling your data, and in some case that can also have legal consequences because you might be talking about something, sending pictures or doing things that are legal in your country but are not legal in another country where you might travel to. Or even worse, laws change and there's then documented cases of you in these apps. So that's a very good reason. The next thing is to de-Google your phone and just not have Google tracking everything. Google has a very bad track record of handling your data. They have spied on users multiple times, been very intransparent about what they actually access, and remember how they earn their money. They earn money by ads, which means they have to know as much about you as possible. So de-Googling is a very valid point for installing GrapheneOS. There's 2 more. One is if you're working in a very security sensitive environment, be it work-wise, you're a journalist, you work for critical infrastructure, things like that, and you just want to be sure that you can lock down your phone, that it doesn't spy on you, or if you have you want to have really safe different profiles, there's a lot in GrapheneOS for that. And the 4th reason is that it's an ideological reason, you just believe in privacy and in your data being yours. And as Louis Rossmann put it very nicely, you don't have to be a complete nutcase to just not want people standing next to your window and watching every step and taking notes of you, because that is exactly what Google and others are doing with you on your phone. And with the phone being more and more important part of your life, with apps, movement, location, people that you talk to, that is something that shouldn't be completely open to all kinds of companies that you haven't even heard of, because your data even gets sold on to them. And lastly, before we jump into the installation itself, if GrapheneOS for some reason isn't the right thing for you, maybe because it's not properly supported by your device, then your next best options, ranked by security and privacy, are DivestOS. That supports a few more devices, especially Fairphone and OnePlus phones, partly, but not the newest ones. They have a great documentation on what devices are supported and what not. And the 2 things you want to look at is, do you get verified boot, and can you relock the bootloader? The next options would be LineageOS in some shape or form, but to be honest, that is not that privacy focused. It's just an alternative to stock Android. So I'm careful with suggesting that. There you'd have to put quite a bit of effort into the whole thing to get it at least a bit more secure, but you will always be running around with an unlocked bootloader, with unverified boot and other things. So it's not quite the same as a GrapheneOS. And then of course you can just go for all kinds of custom ROMs that you find on XDA, which we're not going to be covering here. Let's get to the installation process. The 2 main reasons why this process fails, and you should know these before, is, for one, update the phone. Get your Pixel to the newest version possible and then start the process. And the main reason this fails after that is using a broken or bad USB-C cable. So make sure you take the cable that is really supplied in the box with your Pixel phone, an original cable. If that looks like it's had better days, then you could use an Apple USB-C cable, which is okay. But do not use any old cables or knockoff cables, and especially do not use magnetic ones with magnetic plugs. I've got a video coming up on these. These are great, but they are not good for installing a new operating system on your phone. Now then, let's get started. I'll grab my Pixel7 here, start the screen recording so you can see what I'm doing. And here we want to unlock the developer options. So we go to our bar here, go to the settings, scroll all the way down to About Phone. Here you can see it's a Pixel7, and all the way at the bottom you have build number. Now you've probably done that a few times. You tap it, something like 6 times. Now the screen is black because I have to enter my PIN, and you can see by my touches what PIN I have probably, but this is just for the video. Please do not use that PIN on your real phone. Now we've unlocked developer settings, and we can see it under System, and here you see developer options. So we tap on those, make sure these are on, and now you've just got 2 things that you have to do, and that is, one, you have to make sure that OEM unlocking is on, and if it's not on, then it will warn you. So in this case, I'll switch it on, you will have to put in your PIN again, and then tap enable. And USB debugging you also want on, and you have to confirm it. Now this is done. If you haven't done your updates yet, then make sure after you've installed the updates that you have these 2 settings on. Okay, so you always have to recheck every time you reboot the phone or anything. You need OEM unlocking and USB debugging. Now there's one last thing we have to do on the phone itself, and then we can get started, and that is getting into the bootloader interface. And for that, you have to boot up your phone while pushing the volume button, the volume down button. Now the easiest, most unfiddly way is to tap power and up once together. Then in that case you'll see this little screen here, and you tap restart, and then quickly, just while it is saying restart, you press the volume down button here, and that way it will automatically be pressed while it's booting up. And then you'll be greeted by this screen here, and you could push the volume up and down buttons for it to toggle through, but we'll just leave it on start. And now it's time to connect your PC or your Mac, whatever. Make sure that you use that original cable and not some knockoff cable. You connect it, and now we can get started, and I'll switch over to my Mac. Now, welcome to my Mac. Here you go to grapheneos.org, click on install, the big button, and we'll be using the web USB based installer here. You click on it, and here you should at least make sure that you cover the prerequisites. That is these operating systems here. Basically it boils down to the 2 major releases of all the big operating systems: Windows, Mac, Linux in various flavors or distributions. But nearly more importantly than that is the browsers that are supported, and here it's basically Edge or Chromium. Now make sure that you have your operating systems updated to the absolutely newest version, and make sure that you use a Chrome. That's just the easiest way. I will be careful using derivatives. Yes, Brave is listed, but I will take a stock Chrome. Take a user that doesn't have any plugins, or as few plugins as possible, so you don't run into issues because of some kind of incompatibility or whatever. And let's have a look what we have to do. The steps are OEM unlocking, we've done that already. Then booting into the bootloader interface, we've done that already too. And now we connect the phone. Now make sure that you use the cable that is supplied with the phone itself. Connect it, and now we continue to unlock the bootloader. It will ask you what phone. Obviously then it's the Pixel7. Connect, and then you will have to confirm this on the device itself. Now next would be downloading the appropriate factory images. So here you click on download, and then you will get the release that fits to your phone. Now this is a point of no return. You have to keep that in mind. You definitely don't want to have any data on the phone at this point in time. So back up your phone beforehand, get everything off it, because there's no way of recovering the phone, the data itself. And there's one other quite important thing. You can revert quite easily or roll back to vanilla Android or the Android that was installed. So you can try this, and if you don't like it, you can go back and lock the bootloader again. Now, probably this will void the warranty, but it's next to impossible to find out if you've tried GrapheneOS and reverted back again. So I'm not giving you any legal advice. This is your own responsibility. You have to make good decisions. You're grown up. But in this case, I'd suggest that it's at least a rather safe thing to do. Okay, and there's a few things that you should keep in mind while we're waiting for this download button. It's half done already, and that is do make sure that you don't have any other processes interfering with your USB interfaces. I wouldn't do this on a virtual machine and then pipe through the USB connection or anything like that. That is just something that is a bit dangerous to do. And there's one other thing that you should consider. Sometimes you have some kind of security software running as a hook when you connect devices to USB. All those things you want to have deactivated so you don't run into any trouble. If you run into trouble, the two most common problems are that you don't have enough space or RAM on the laptop that you're using to flash it onto the device. In that case, just make sure that you have 10, 12, 15 gigabytes of free space on the device itself. And the other common thing is that for some reason, if you've worked a lot with connecting Androids and unlocking and relocking, sometimes the USB drivers or the USB daemon just doesn't connect anymore properly. And for that, you just reboot your laptop and then everything should be fine. You should also make sure that you have the operating system on the newest version, so install all updates that are available before you start this and do a full reboot, just to be on the safe side. Now, we've got the whole release downloaded, and now we can flash it onto the device. So we tap on flash release, and don't worry, the phone will go on and off and on and off and reboot all the time. That is fine. It says here too what it's doing. So just lean back, relax, everything is fine. It's going to work out, yeah? You're going to be great, okay? So restarting the device, you can read what it's actually doing. But we're not going to go into too many details here. So usually it restarts about 3 times, and then we have to relock the bootloader when it's done. So restarting, I think this is the final time. Now it will boot up in between into fastbootd. Everything is fine. It looks very interesting, the things that you can do there, but keep your fingers to yourself. Okay? No means no. Do not touch the phone while you're doing that. No matter what pops up, you can see in your browser writing product. So it is working. You don't want to change anything now. Now we're done. And it says here, flash Panther factory to device. Now, you might have something else there because you might have a different Pixel phone. Panther is the release for my phone, for my version. And you're still on this bootloader interface on the phone itself. And now comes the magic of the whole thing. We are relocking the bootloader. So you tap it, bootloader is locked. And on the screen itself, you'll see that it says here, do not lock bootloader. Nope, we want to change that. Lock the bootloader, and we want to confirm it once with the power button. And this is basically the only part that is, well, I wouldn't call it difficult, but you just have to be careful that you go through the steps properly. And now you'll be booting into GrapheneOS. And then you'll hit the whole onboarding for GrapheneOS. Let's run through the setup itself. It's rather easy. You tap Start, and I take English United Kingdom because they invented the language, and you set your date and time. I won't connect it to the Wi-Fi right now. Yes, the SIM card is missing. Location services will switch off for now. Fingerprint setup I'm going to do later too. And to protect your phone, I'll at least set up a PIN. But that will have to be a simple one just for the sake of this video. Now then, I'm not going to restore any apps and data. Start, and there we are. It is GrapheneOS. You could verify the installation. It is described on grapheneos.org. how you can just compare hashes and then make sure that you really have the original version of the system installed here. So now let's do the last final steps on the device itself. You'll be greeted by a very minimalistic black interface, no colored icons. You scroll up and you get all the basic apps here. Many of them are the Android open source project based apps. You want to hook it up to the Wi-Fi and tap on apps. And now here you can install additional ones. And the trick here now is, if you want to go the Google way, you would install the Google Play services. It tells you what it will install. I'm going to do that now in this case, even though I don't want to run Google things on this device, but I said we'll just have a quick look at it so you are sorted with everything. So here you see it installs. You can update this app. Now, do you want to give this app network permission? I will give it network permission for a short moment of time, just at the beginning, and then in a moment I'm going to take all these permissions away again. So this would be the way of getting Google to run on your device. Now, after this is finished installing, I would very much suggest limiting the apps here, so these apps, so they don't access your sensors and other things on your device itself. Now, how do you get apps onto this phone? Well, for that you go to f-droid.org, and here you have an open source app store. Now the idea here is not everything is just automatically perfect because it's open source, but this app store gives you access to some very interesting apps, and it gives us the possibility to get to the Aurora Store, which is actually where we want to go. So now we'll install F-Droid. We have to allow network permissions. So we'll install it and we'll open it. Yep, that's fine. We'll allow notifications and it's updating repositories. Now, the next step is we use this mainly to get to the Aurora Store, as I said just now. So we'll search for Aurora and here it is, install, and yes, it's not allowed to install apps, which it should. We'll allow that, and now we can accept the Aurora Store installation. So now we've allowed F-Droid to install apps, and that has now really installed the Aurora Store. Now with that, we can go into the Aurora Store, and first we have to accept the terms of service, and you don't have to do anything here. Next step, session installer is pre-defined, that is correct. Then we'll take the system theme, which is now in dark mode. You can choose an accent color, go for something more colorful. Now you have to grant the permissions. So installer permissions, so it can install. I would set the second one too. That's mainly for larger apps, for games, things like that. Go back again. We'll grant external storage access, Aurora Store, manage all files, and last but not least, notifications. You need those because it helps. I'll explain later. So now, in we go into the Aurora Store. Now the Aurora Store, that's a common misconception here, is not some place where random APKs are saved. It pulls the application packets from the Google Play Store via the Play Store API. So you're getting original packets. There's no funny APK mirrors and other things going on. So how do we get to our apps? We log in as anonymous. You can log in with your Google account, and that is useful in some cases. Now you see all the apps here. So you can just install the apps that you want to install. You could, well, let's take SoundCloud, install that, and it will download, and then afterwards it will ask to install the whole thing. Network permission, well, in the case of SoundCloud, yes, that is the only permission that is always shown, because there's just some apps that you just don't need to give network permissions to. Now, there's a few things here. For one, sometimes it takes a while until it has really grasped that it's installed. So we'll just have to wait a moment, and there the notifications popped up and it's done. Now, in the listings itself, you will see if apps require Google Play services or not. it also tells you if there are any trackers installed, and it will tell you which ones. Now Graphene tries to reduce all of this as much as possible. There's lots of things working under the bonnet, but that will sort of break the scope of this video to go into the whole thing. Now we can then search for all kinds of apps, as in maps, for example. There is an issue right now with Aurora that search isn't working all the time. To mitigate that, you just go into your accounts, you log out, and you log back in, and then it will work. Alternatively, you can log in with your Google account, then search and everything will work automatically. The only thing you're giving Google there is that they know which apps you've installed, which is not that terrible. So personally, I would just log in with a throwaway Google account just to have an easier experience to get the apps. That doesn't mean that they can track you now on the system itself, and the Google Play services that we've installed just now, they are still sandboxed. You can now search for maps, and then you'll get Google Maps, and I've just installed it just now. You can then access it, and here you have a fully working maps with all the other features that it brings. Now, there's one misconception here sometimes, or one bug that is reported that isn't really a bug. When you start out with maps or Waze or anything that needs your location, you've just freshly installed the device, you will need to go outside for a few minutes for it to catch the first GPS connection. From then on, it works. But so if you just sit in your cellar in your flat, install the phone and install then a navigation app, then you won't be getting GPS straight away. You just have to walk outside once. Okay, and here you see now I have all kinds of apps installed. And now you see the idea behind the colored apps and the non-colored apps, because the colored apps are apps that you've installed in addition to the default safe ones, sort of, and completely tracking-free ones from Graphene itself. And here I have PayPal, for example, running. I've logged in already, it works fine, no problems here. And I've logged into my bank account, which is a secondary account, that worked fine too. So banks and everything else work. So there you have it, you've got a GrapheneOS running. I've showed you a few hiccups that you might run into, so you can really get started without any problems. For the GPS, just go outside, run around for a few minutes, you're fine. And with the Aurora Store, log out, log back in, or use a throwaway Google account so you can fully utilize it. Now, there's a few specialities that I just want to show you. Some things that I find are very nice about this. For one, all location access gets routed into GrapheneOS and not via Google. Google services and Google apps are not somehow godlike apps and services that can just change everything, do everything, and access everything. They are just one other app, sandboxed, and you can limit their access. For Google Play services, for example, I would limit internet access, I would limit location, all sensors, just to be on the safe or private side. And there's two more things that I just want to show you here, and that's something that I really enjoy. For one, that is, you can just generally switch off all microphone and all camera access. So if you want to have a private discussion, or if you're talking about something critical at work, you can just switch it off, and then you don't have to do anything like this anymore. Please subscribe to the channel if you're interested in becoming digitally independent, if you want to change the way you use and consume digital media. I'm on a journey to become digitally independent, and I would be very happy if you would join me on this journey. Please leave the video a like so the YouTube algorithm does its magic and shows this video to other people. Thanks a lot, and see you soon. I'm Oliver. Bye-bye.